So just to recall us talking about a prism and a pyramid in class, maybe you weren't there, so maybe this will help. So a prism basically has two sides that are congruent and across from each other. So those sides are your bases. So let's say, for instance, you have something that looks like this. The two identical sides that are across from each other are going to be the two triangles, not the rectangle at the bottom, but the two triangles, because they're identical shape and size and they're across from each other. So those are bases. Don't think that bases are your bottoms. So a prism formula is volume equals big B times H. That big B right there refers to the area of that base that you identify. So it's very important you identify the right side as the base. So the big B, once again, is the area of the shaded region in this picture. It's not the area of the bottom, because if you look at the bottom is actually a rectangle, and there's not a rectangle across from that one. That's the exact same shape and same size. Another prism, for instance, could be a rectangular prism that looks something like this. Doing kind of a bad job of drawing it, but you know what I mean. So you can look at the base being this here and this here. They're supposed to be identical, but they're across from each other, and they are going to be your bases. So your big B would be the area of one of those. In a pyramid, the difference is, so the difference in the formula is it's 1/3 your big B times your H. But a pyramid, remember, is basically coming to a point. So there's only one base in a pyramid, and that base is the side that's opposite of the point. So if your point is here, the side opposite is here. So that's a triangular base. Well, you can also have a rectangular base in a pyramid. So if you imagine all the corners or vertices of that rectangle down there coming to a point, now you have a rectangular pyramid. So no matter which one you're looking at, the shape of that base is very, very important, because that's how you're going to find that big B in either formula. So there's the formula sheet on the website. It looks like this. Hopefully you found it. Maybe you want to copy it or save it to your files. But basically the part that we need, or the sections we need off this formula sheet, are right here. We're going to need the volume formulas, and we're going to need the area formulas. And that's because our bases are different shapes. So we're going to have to find the area of those different shapes. And then our volume of our cones, our prisms, or pyramids, whatever it may be, we're going to need those formulas too. So that's why we're going to need those two sections. So I'm just going to zoom in on those two sections. So once again, we're going to need the volume section, and we're going to need the area section. So hopefully you located this assignment. If you haven't, hit pause and go ahead and locate it so that we're actually working on it together at the same time. I'm just going to do a few of the problems on here and just bounce around to make sure I kind of do one of each type, and then you'll just do the rest. So I'll do number 1, because obviously we haven't done any, so doing one like number 1 is fine. So remember, the first thing you need to do is identify the base. Now your big B, when I say your base, I mean your big B, doesn't necessarily mean it's the bottom. Someone could identify this, let me switch colors here. Someone can identify this side and the opposite side that is the exact same size and shape as the big B. It's actually perfectly fine in a rectangular prism to identify any two sides opposite each other, because they all can be bases. So whether or not you see this kind of sitting on its side or standing straight up, you can actually use any side as your base. As long as you use the formulas correctly, you'll get the same answer as someone who used different sides. So I'm going to use this side down here as my big B, and that is a rectangle. Notice it has an opposite, a rectangle of the exact same size and shape across from it. So I'm going to use those as my big B. So the first step, remember, is identifying what kind of figure you have. We have a prism. So remember the volume formula for a prism, which I wrote on the other page, is volume equals big B times H. Now that is the only formula that's not on the formula sheet. I think it's just because it's so basic that they don't put it on here. So you might want to take some time to just jot it down on your formula sheet to actually write out that a prism's volume is big B times H. Let me erase that little mark right there. So equals big B times H. All right, so that's the one we're going to use. The volume of a prism is big B times H. Now remember, the big B is very, very important. It's not a number that you can just see in the picture. Big B is not 2. It is not 4. We actually have to calculate it. And remember that big B, you first identify the shape. So we see a rectangle. And to find the area of that rectangle, area of a rectangle is little b times H. So that means it's just so area is little b times H. It's just the base and the height of that rectangle. So that rectangle that we're shading, we have to find basically like the length and the width of that rectangle so that we can put it in for B and H. So if we look at it, we know that that side is 2. So I know that that is my base or my height of that rectangle. So just that rectangle at the bottom, it has dimensions of 2 times, and if we look at the top there, we see that 4 inches. Well, that has to be the same 4 inches for the bottom back side, or even the front because it's a rectangle. So that also has to be 4 inches. So we can look at it as little b and little h is 2 times 4. Which, of course, that equals 8. So our big B is 8. Not the final answer, but our big B is 8. So now we can do volume equals big B, which is 8, times the height of this prism now. So now if I just erase everything here and recognize, erase my big B. Hold on now. Okay, and recognize that this was our shaded area. So if I recognize that as my shaded area, now I got to recognize the height of the prism, how tall it is. So that is going to be 2 inches. And that is 16. Actually, let me move that because I don't want it there. It's going to run into my other space. So 16 inches cubed, because remember, volume is always cubed units. So that is my final answer for the volume. So I found my big B, which is the area of the shaded region, and then I multiplied it by the height. So just to show that you could have picked 2 different sides as the bases, and it would have came out to be the same answer. So I'll just show that. Let's say, for instance, someone chose this side as their base or their big B. So if they chose that side, and then of course this would be the side opposite, so those would be the bases. So if they chose those, no matter what, it's still a rectangle is a square. Excuse me, that is not right. A square is a rectangle, so it's still going to be the same formula to find the area of that shaded region. So it's still going to be little b times H, which is equal, well, if you just look at that shaded region, it's equal to 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. So in that situation, our big B would equal 4. So 4 would be put in place of big B. So volume equals 4. Now, if we shaded that side, then you have to realize that this prism would then be sitting on its side. So the height of the prism would basically be that edge right there. So it's kind of like if it was sitting straight up, it'd be 4 inches tall. So that 4 inches is our height. And notice you still get 16 inches cubed for the volume. All right, so now let's go ahead and do number 2 since we haven't did a pyramid yet. So if we're finding the volume of a pyramid, if you look at your formula sheet, the volume of a pyramid is 1/3 big B times H. So I know I'm going to use volume equals 1/3 big B times H. Now remember, you have to identify what big B is. Big B is not 10, it's not 8, it's not 6, it's not 12. It's no number sitting here on this figure already. Remember, we have to calculate it by calculating the area of the base. So I'm identifying the base down here as this triangle because it's across from the point. Remember, the side across from the point in a pyramid is always going to be the base. So I need to find my big B is the area of the triangle at the bottom. So if you look at the triangle formula, the area for a triangle is 1/2 little b times H. So I have to do 1/2 little b times H. So I mentioned in class, for those of you who are there, that if you're doing, I'm just going to actually trace it now and because we need to identify where that right angle mark is. So if we're looking at this triangle as our base, we want the two sides that form the 90-degree angle. So that would be this edge here, which is 6, and this edge here, which is 8. That is our little b, so the base and the height of that triangle is just kind of turned. So that is 8 and 6. Remember, you do not use that hypotenuse. You do not use that 10. You do not need that 10. All right, so you do not use that as, you do not use the hypotenuse as your little b or your little h. So if I go ahead and do 1/2 8 times 6, I get 24. So my big B is now 24. So now that I have big B, I can go ahead and use my volume formula, which is 1/3, just taking it down from the top, big B, which I now know is 24, times h. Now if we look at the height of the pyramid, I'm going to erase some of this so I could see. All right, my height of my pyramid is 12. So that's how tall the pyramid is. So I can go ahead and put the 12 in there. And now if I actually calculate that, I get that the volume equals 96, and my units are meters cubed. So that is my final answer for the volume of the pyramid. So remember, you have to find the big B by looking at its shape and then finding the area of that shape. And then you multiply by 1/3 in the height. All right, that's for a pyramid. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and bounce around. So it looks like the next one that I'll do is number 5, because we've done a pyramid but not a rectangular pyramid. Notice the base there is a rectangle. So now when I do my big B, I know it's a rectangle. So I'm still going to be using the volume formula for a pyramid, which is 1/3 big B times h. But now I know that my big B is a rectangle because I shaded it in. Remember that the area of a rectangle is little b times h. So little b times h, remember, which is just the base and the height of that rectangle. It has nothing to do with the whole pyramid, just the shaded region. So remember, the numbers have to come off of that big B, which is 10 times 4 has to come off of that rectangle. So that equals 40. So now I know that my big B is 40. So now I'm going to put 40 in for big B. So now the volume formula becomes 1/3 my big B, which is 40, times the height of my pyramid, which notice is 11. So that is my height. So now if I calculate that, I get that the volume is equal to, well, it's actually going to be a fraction at first, and then we'll go ahead and do approximately as well. But 440 thirds, I don't like that line, or which is approximately 146 point, if we go to 2 decimal places, we go round to 6, 7. And our units here are meters, so meters cubed. So that would be our volume for that pyramid. All right. So I think the last one I'll do is number 6. Or actually, maybe I should do 6 and 8. I don't think we did one like 8. Yeah, okay, we'll do 6 and 8. So on number 6, we can first identify that it is a prism because it doesn't come all to a point like a pyramid. So remember, the prism formula is just volume equals big B times h. All right, and then if we identify the base, our big B, so if I just shade in that whole bottom section down there, notice it's that big rectangle at the bottom. So I know the shape of my big B is a rectangle. So my big B is a rectangle. Remember, the area formula for a rectangle is little b times h. So if we go ahead and do big B equals little b times h, remember that when you're finding your big B, those numbers that you're using to calculate the area have to come off of that shaded area, that shaded region. So I know like my length and my width of that rectangle, it's the same thing as my little b and my h, is 12 and 4. So 12 and 4. Because those are the sides of that rectangle at the bottom. So let me erase all that because it's getting kind of messy. So that rectangle down there at the bottom has a length of 12. and a width of 4, which remember that's the same thing as base times height, little b times h. So the area of that shaded region down there is equal to 48. So now I know my big B is 48. Now I can go ahead and put it in for big B. So volume equals big B, which is 48, times the height. Well, let me erase again so we can look and see how tall this thing is. So if the base down there is this little distance right here of how tall that is 2 feet. So it is 2 feet tall, so very short. And when we multiply that together, we get that the volume is 96. And then our units are feet cubed. So our volume is 96 feet cubed. All right, so the last one that I'll do before you guys finish the rest is number 8. So we're looking at number 8. We're looking to see where it has two congruent shapes that are opposite each other. Remember, big B does not mean bottom. It means the base. And the base could be the side, it could be the top, it could be the bottom, it could be any side depending on how the prism is laid. But in this case, if you look at the two identical shapes that we have, it's going to be the triangles. Those are the only two identical or congruent shapes that are across from each other. So therefore, our big B is a triangle. Now, no matter what, we're looking at a prism though, because remember, anytime it has two identical bases, it's a prism. If it only had one identical base, like number 5 here, and number 5, it's one base, so it's a pyramid, because it comes to a point. But we know that this number 8 is a prism, so we are going to do volume equals big B times h. So remember, we have to actually find the area of that shaded region. So we know our big B is a triangle, and to find the area of a triangle, if we look at our formula sheet again, the area of a triangle is 1/2 little b times h for that triangle. So 1/2 little b times h. So if we look at that triangle, and I'm going to erase what I darkened in. Okay, so that's fine. Has nothing else on it, so we can darken in that. Remember that is the same size and same shape as the one opposite of it. So we can get measurements off of either one. And remember, when you're doing a triangle, you want to use the two sides that form the right angle. So if we look at the two sides that form the right angle, basically you're not using the hypotenuse. So we want to use this leg and that leg. Well, notice we have the measurement in the back for one, but we have the measurement in the front for the other. So we're not using the 5 because the 5, so if you draw a line across from your right angle, that would be the hypotenuse. So we don't want to use that 5 because that would be the hypotenuse. All right, so we want to use the 4 and the 3. So big B equals not 1/2, 1/3, but 1/2. So we have to use the 4 and the 3. So 1/2 times 4 times 3 equals 6. So now we can go ahead and plug big B into our volume formula. So we have volume equals big B, which is 6, times the height. Now remember, this prism, since the bases are on the side, is basically like laying on its side. So if I erase all my markings here, we can look at it, if you kind of use your imagination a little bit, if it was sitting up on the base, if you were able to turn it to where it was sitting on the base, so it kind of like flipped it that way, you would see that this length would be the height. Well, that's the same as this length, which is 8. So that is the height of the prism. So that's our h. So our volume equals 48. And our units are meters. And then it's cubed since it's volume. So that is number 8. So go ahead and try the others. And then I'll put just like a naked key up, basically where it's just answers, no work, so you can kind of see if you got those other problems right. And if you didn't, just kind of rework them and see maybe how you can use other measurements and make sure you use the correct bases, your big B, and etc. to get the correct answer.